he saw me drawing on this map, and he literally pulled it from me. He said, "What is this thing?" And I said, "This is my map of your whole household and your life." And he's like, "Do me a favor, don't bring that big pile ever again. You give me this. When you get home, I want you to send me another copy. I'm giving it to my spouse, and she's finally going to understand what's going on." And that's when I realized that the consumer had the same problem I had.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to the Augmented Advisor podcast, where we showcase thought leaders, ideas, and strategies to help improve the advisor and client experience in wealth management. The Augmented Advisor is brought to you by Blue Leaf, the all-in-one wealth management platform with best-in-class advisor and client experiences in reporting, billing, and rebalancing. On this episode of the show, John Prendergast and I are joined by Adam Holt, CEO and founder of AssetMap, for a vibrant conversation about creating a great client experience, both through the tools that you use to engage with your clients like AssetMap and Blue Leaf, as well as the processes you as an advisor use to serve your clients. Now, before we get rolling, please take a second to follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to the show so you don't miss an episode of the podcast going forward. Okay, let's get to our conversation with Adam Holt. Adam Holt, great to see you, buddy. Welcome to the Augmented Advisor podcast. We're thrilled to have you.
Thanks, Mike and John. Good to see you and hear your voices.
Yeah, good times.
That's right. We've been laughing more off screen than I
know.
I know.
And poor John is coming down from, which if you're a podcast host, this does happen occasionally. Your equipment just decides it's not participating well today. So poor John had to have the delay of like, I got to reboot the computer and try to figure out everything on my soundboard and blah, blah, blah. So you can just see it on his face. He's just like raging. So we'll give you a couple of seconds to just come back down to earth. Anyway, exactly,
deep breath moment.
All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to this show because we're going to be talking a lot about client experiences on today's episode. And one of the common threads that both you, Adam, with AssetMap, and John with Blue Leaf is that you each started your respective companies with client experience in mind as a driving force. So I thought it might be a great idea to kick things off with a bit of maybe an origin story conversation about what led you to found AssetMap and what was the core problem you were trying to solve?
Well, I think the answer is neurosis and high expectations. Right. No, I don't think that I know, John, you may have a different story on this one, but for me, I tell everybody I'm a recovering financial planner. I've been a CFP for many years, 25 years in the practice of financial advice in Philadelphia. Helped to build an estate planning practice with an asset management arm and a business consultation side. So we worked with all kinds of people, 25 people, got to about 1,600 clients, over $1 billion of AUM. And it was a great business, but we built it on the backbone of this innovation that we created, which came out of necessity, like most good innovation, which was people's complexity was really challenging to deal with. And we led, like most advisors, with financial planning, built these awesome 90-page, 80-page reports. Clients, it looked impressive, but they didn't read it. They could barely understand the balance sheet, let alone, the whole burn down strategy. They just wanted confidence. And so we realized a long time ago, actually it was 2004, my first version of AssetMap came out, got a compliance approved in 2006, used it to basically visualize everything going on in people's households and their lives, things that we had access to, like, maybe a 401k or a brokerage account, but also the obscure stuff. This obscure stuff that included real estate, private equity, split interest in trusts, right? The stuff that tended never to get on a balance sheet in a way that they understood. And that really kind of parlayed in 2006 when I got it finally compliance approved, and I tripled my revenue 3 years in a row. And it was like, okay, maybe this is worthy of a platform. So that's what happened. Long story short, I kind of look back where we are today, thousands of advisors literally around the world in multiple currencies and languages using it to engage what we call engage around advice.
Yeah. So Adam, I think you're underselling your innovation there. From my perspective, your company is really known as somebody with a company with a unique user experience and a unique way to present information. It's been kind of a calling card for AssetMap, and that vision didn't just pop into your head one night exactly as it is today. So I'm sort of curious, what's the process that you went through, particularly in the early days to create it, refine it, can you talk a little bit about that?
I can, and thank you for saying that. I think I tend to get so stuck in telling the story that I forget all the thoughtfulness that went behind it. Interestingly enough, the versions from I think that I first sketched it out in 2002. And ironically, just to give credit, there's a lot of financial advisors who attempt to communicate visually. And I think that our alignment and why we do this is to help educate, get people comfort, connect what I don't know with what I do know. And so this is really a literacy project of just helping you understand what's going on in your own life. I think the bigger challenge originally for me, John, was I built it with the thoughtfulness of myself as the customer. I needed a way to understand the complexity, the dynamic of the family members, their entities, the members, generation 1, 2, and 3, right? Because we're making longer term big decisions from a legal, tax, insurance, and investment perspective, not just investments, episodically, like looking at just one account. And the key to that is that fact finding as a core utility for all consultative guidance, right? It's a fact finding, KYC, it's required, right? You got to know the client.
Right.
This process was very broken to me. And it was typically fill out a fillable PDF or a big, huge brochure or I don't know what. It was just totally disorganized. And the real goal originally, John, was for me to try to organize this in a way that I could interpret it like a financial x-ray. I very much align this to, we would meet with our clients. They would take their shoebox of stuff in their head, half of it, and maybe in an actual paper. They don't even know what they dump it on the table, and I got to figure out what we're working with. And it's interesting what we learned is that, and there's a fun story around this, is that I created the asset map originally for myself, and I tried to organize it by who controls these financial instruments and where are they located and what's their value and what's their tax dynamic, because I needed a way to quickly interpret these households. And of course, share it with my team and get their insight and their advisor insight to what do they see differently than I saw. It was a really collaborative internal process. And I had it on my desk. I was at a client's house. I had my awesome Morningstar and my e-money output. And I was there to go through all of it with them. What happened? He saw me drawing on this map and he literally pulled it from me. He said, "What is this thing?" And I said, "This is my map of your whole household and your life." And he's like, "Do me a favor. Don't bring that big pile ever again. You give me this. When you get home, I want you to send me another copy. I'm giving it to my spouse, and she's finally going to understand what's going on." And that's when I realized that the consumer had the same problem I had. Which is they didn't know where their stuff was. And they had no context to either communicate it between each other without it feeling intimidating. And also now all of a sudden they knew where everything was. So they had this treasure map. And that had huge utility to the consumer. And that's why I say we saw the revenue spike, because now all of a sudden what happened? We started building these for everybody. And then the benefit for us as advisors is we just found more ways to serve. So we just doubled, tripled our gathering of business just natively because we could see what was a mess.
Wow. It's funny, Mike, doesn't that mirror the story that Carl Richards told about how he started doing the drawings when we talked to him a few months back?
That's exactly what I was thinking is that, because it does, we are, as humans, we've, I guess for thousands of years, we've been drawing on cave walls and whatever, just to make a point. Let me show you, get me to the whiteboard or whatever. Let me, this is what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? And you even do it with your hand gestures. You're like, remember that thing and the blah, blah, blah. So people can process that type of information. And it's amazing that you had basically an aha moment with a client that says, I want to see this.
It's true. Well, there's a component of that, Mike. Sorry to cut you off, but there's an important aspect to this. So early in my own, actually it's in my college career, I studied remote sensing and geographic information systems. What does that have anything to do with finance? It basically was making land use decisions from layered geographic data, AKA maps or satellite imagery, to try to make better decisions. Where should I put this road? What you typically would think of as Google Maps today, like you can layer traffic and whatever, topography on top. I was trying to actually emulate that in finance. So can I layer information spatially because we do remember things in relationship to each other visually, right? Like, oh yeah, you know, your income over here, and I'm using my hands to describe, like you said, where that stuff is. People remember that. They're like, yeah, you know that box that 401k at Principal has $1 million in it. Yeah, that one. That's now I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I want to move money from there to there. They're like, okay, I get it. And they get that confidence, and they're like, okay, you've engaged me and I feel like I'm part of it now. You're not talking down to me, you're talking with me. And that's an important aspect of where we're going as an industry.
So it's interesting because it's one thing to do that for your own firm and to do it, I presume, somewhat manually. You know, maybe you went through PowerPoint iterations and, you know,
Visio.
Excel driven versions and all this. And then you try and move it into a platform to create it out of software. So that must have been an interesting learning journey because it's very different. And you're trying to get a similar result, but the medium's really different. So can you talk a little bit about that translation process and sort of, you know, how you iterated through, and what did you learn in the early days that you assumed maybe was right and turned out to be really wrong? You know, I'd love to hear that story.
My dev team would tell you that Adam doesn't think anything was wrong with the original because it's been so scaled, and I'm so stuck on seeing things this way. It's like giving me a set of, I don't know, 3D glasses, and they're not red and blue. And you're like, no, you can't change that. Like, that's fundamental to how they work. I think when we finally figured out a version that was teachable and scalable, and people saw it, because it didn't exist before, they were enabled to kind of see it that way, learn that way, and then they were indoctrinated. So in a strange way, we actually have kind of created a standard that's now touched over 1.25 million people that are in Asset Map. I mean, it's huge. And when you think of this idea and the advisors that use them, we realize that we actually are on kind of path to create the standard because it doesn't exist. So we're just going to create what the standard financial X-ray looks like, and we call it Asset Map. And we're actually working on projects that will enable that at the consumer level as well. But it was very challenging, John, to contemplate, first of all, your life and all its complexity needs to originally fit on 8.5 by 11. That's the size of a standard piece of paper. Should it be profile? Should it be landscape? Well, I guess it depends on the complexity and who owns what. Okay, fine, we can do that. But now enable it for the millions of iterations of complexity that people have in their lives. Add their businesses, add their trusts, add a generation 1, 2. It gets really rough. And I think today still our special sauce is we can handle that complexity, where a lot of visualizations that have kind of been, I think, inspired by Asset Map, they're nowhere even close to that because they realize the depth of the double down investment they're going to have to make to still be printable on 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 or a screen share or a widescreen. And we have all that variability. That took an enormous amount of effort. And I don't think anybody has any clue that, you know, what it takes to do that. In fact, I think it's been actually a big moat for us. It's been a barrier to competition because it's like, you don't even want to play that game. It just took years to do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you think about the process you went through, you didn't start out necessarily as a software company, but essentially you iterated early on like most modern software companies do. You used what was essentially a paper prototype, and you put it in front of people and you got direct end user feedback as opposed to opinions not from end users, right? And that sort of direct research, you know, our experience at Blue Leaf is gold. And you have to treat every end user in that same way when you're building a product if you want to make it really good for that end user. I think we see a lot of products in our industry that they they'll create a product that's really meant to be consumed by the client, but then they'll get feedback from advisors and it misses, right? And you've got to go directly to that end user to really understand behavior. Because, you know, advisors are great at a lot of things, but not necessarily interpreting user behavior. So it's funny how you essentially intuited your way into that process early on, back when that was a relatively new approach. So well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm really super proud of the team and the advisors that have adopted it, because they're really doing something that doesn't have they're not replacing something. All right. I mean, is Asset Map in its current form replacing financial planning? Not really. In fact, it turns out, according to Joel Bruckenstein, 70% of our users also use a core financial planning tool. We actually integrate with several of them, and it's interesting. There's something you mentioned that's, I think, important for people to realize. How do you get your customer engaged in the process of whatever you're delivering, right? So if we're delivering financial advice, it typically tends to be a presentation mindset. Let me educate you as to what's going on in your life and what you should do and what it means if you don't, and here's my recommended action. And the client is more a recipient of that information, feedback. Okay, you know what? All right, yeah, I trust you, I don't. And in a weird way, since the financial services organization, as I was part of and still have an interest in, is in the moment of selling solutions or monetizing solutions or implementation, we're really using this as a sales enablement process, right? We're building trust with our customers in order to get them. But how do you actually engage them to the point where they feel like they're part of it? You give them some access to their money, as you're doing, right? Give them insight, ongoing insight, and feel like I'm on top of it. We found in our process that when we actually printed the asset map for face-to-face meetings, or sent it in advance and allowed them to print it and put a pen in front of them, they started drawing right on it. Like that cave drawing Mike mentioned, right? They're actually coloring in things, making it more their own, adding like hairstyles to the people. Someone's actually correcting it, putting their notes. And we saw a complete shift in their ownership of the process. Now they were actually working on and contemplating and thinking differently about, oh, wait, that's right. I do have 5 different IRAs. Why have we not rolled them together? I don't know. Maybe I just never got to it. I tell you, why don't we consolidate this whole picture and just simplify, just get rid of these and put it in something that complements the other stuff. You know what? Can you guys just do that? Yep. Did I show them a Morningstar? Did I show them a burn down chart? Did I show them this Monte Carlo? Nope.
Yeah.
Didn't need to, because they recognize the problem. Why are all the assets in his name and there's nothing in her name? Why is that? Probably because you didn't know to think about it. And you just talk about all the assets being a household asset. But we all know in the real world, someone has all the control and someone has no insight. And if the legal situation's not set up right, that could be a mess. Let's fix it. So household organization, when someone can actually get involved in it, participate in it, is really, really palpable in terms of how it changes the dynamic that we're now working on your life and you're part of it. It's not like I'm presenting, it's actually I'm participating. And that's a different movement that I've been trying to herald with respect to advice engagement, is how do you help them be part of the process and feel a different level of ownership, which that value accrues to the professional.
That movement is one that John and I have been talking about for like 12, 13 years when he first was starting Blue Leaf. And I remember he was bringing those paper things, and he and I were sitting at lunch walking through like what, the prototype for Blue Leaf might look like and how it might work and so forth. This new experiential and approachable tool set that advisors can put in front of their clients, because as you mentioned earlier in our conversation, bringing stacks of reports, the 90-page financial plan, using terms like alpha and beta, actually speaking Greek to your clients, doesn't really help them. And so they just kind of get it glazed over and nod along. It's kind of like when your doctor says you got XYZ-osis, whatever, and you're like, I don't know what the hell that is. Like, you actually talk real talk to me.
Yeah.
Putting something in front of them, as you said, that they can understand, that's visually approachable. That I always use a phrase that they use in the military, breaking it down Barney style, so that Barney the dinosaur, so that even like a school age kid can understand. This is really powerful, because then you get an engaged client who wants to talk about things more, who wants to give you more information, and might lead to more assets and more business. That's really powerful. One of the things that's interesting to me, and I think this stands out when you look at Asset Map, is that it's got this really clean and intuitive design. And I know that didn't happen by accident. And as we just talked about, it's not the MO for most financial firms. It's like,
Yeah.
especially legacy stuff that goes in front of an advisor on their desktop. It's usually like really cumbersome to use. How do you think about interface design, and how is it reflected in the process that you and the team are working on for the product for the advisors?
I would have to say, I mean, for those that know me, they probably say I'm probably overbearing on this one. But there's a joke that I saw once. It was actually a joke. It said, it was a poster, and it said, UX is like a joke. If I have to explain it, it's not good. And I remember that poster, and I was like, yes, that captures my entire attitude, because I love humor and I'm always joking around. So I was like, that's it. That really explains it. If I have to explain this, how to do something, I failed. And so I've held the team to a pretty high standard. I have a design background, and sometimes people are like, Adam, you're a financial planner. What are you talking about design?
Yeah.
I'm a closet design freak. Like I thought I was gonna be an architect. That's why I did that GIS stuff.
I knew you and I were going to get along.
Yeah. Okay, great. See, and I built one of my first house, I built all the furniture myself. I'm like a crazy person like this, and I still do all the artwork in our house. And so when I look at the product, I treat it, John, you'll relate to this. I treat it like one of my kids. So I think of it as my second daughter, and I want her to look good when she goes to school. I want her to feel good. It makes her look good. It makes her feel good. She's got actually personality. And I was like, we're going to build this. This is going to build this ethos into the product. It's super easy to use, clean design. And that's how we tried to set apart. I think still today that design works pretty well. And we're already seeing it's going to work with consumers too. So I think it's really critical. I know you guys have done a great job with it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that. If you have got to explain it, there was a book that we adopted as kind of our mantra, which is called Designing the Obvious. I think the author is Robert Hochman. Cool. I mean, it's 12, 15 years old at this point, but it was on precisely this point where if someone has to think at all about anything in an interface, then there's friction, there's cognitive friction. And so the holy grail, it's, your iPhone, right? Nobody ever gave you a manual, or you didn't probably use a training class to learn how to use this thing. You flip it open and you start using it. And it seems to me that very few people, well, anywhere in the software industry really understand this, but in particular in wealth management, how hard it is to deliver something that's obvious. Seems like it should be the simplest thing in the world. But can you talk about some of honestly, the tedious considerations that you've sort of forced your team to think about in doing that? Because I know in our case, I'm a bit of a tyrant on this. I respect that. So there's a design principle that I don't know if I came up with it, but it's what I used. I haven't seen it elsewhere, but it's this concept called simple rich. The key to a technical platform, in order for it to have merit with a professional, is that it cannot be Fisher Price. So how do you cross this bridge between really usable and functional and still make the professional advisor look like a rock star? Because this stuff is going to be customer facing. They're going to actually look at this. The client's going to interact with it. And you're usually charging something for that experience. And the customer is expecting for this to be better than what I can get on Google, right? And that typically is validated how? By a very technical experience. I mean, the perfect experience, or analogy, I think, is medical, right? We're all looking at your MRI here. Let me show you where the colors show your brain. And you're like, wow, I can see that's my face. And I know I just went in that big banging machine. And the professional is pointing out, what does this mean? And you can see this here, and this is where the problem is, okay? This is why we need to do surgery, or this is why you need physical therapy. Same thing for an x-ray, right? A good user experience or a good bedside manner would be a doctor who puts up the x-ray and shows you and says, okay, you see your son's arm here? Yep. This is where he broke it. And this is what I need to do to fix it. Okay, does everybody see that? And you're like, oh yeah, I can see it. And that's where the pins are gonna go. And you feel more comfortable because you kind of understand what's going on, right? That
process of having a professional explain and show you where the problem is in normal parlance, as opposed to technical jargon, has a huge impact in the UX. And so we needed to figure out a way, how would you take this typically intimidating technical stuff like all your finances, not just your assets, but your liabilities and your cash flows and your insurance policies, which nobody understands. Put that on a visualization so that somebody could walk you through it to the point where you're like, okay, I understand. At least this guy knows what's going on. And I feel comfortable. So interestingly enough, our real challenge was take something technical, make it simple enough to be consumable, but technical enough to be deep, which meant rich, so that I can have multiple layers of conversation: tax, legal, insurance, investment, structure, banking. Right? So, but it's the same, I'm looking at the same thing. And that, I think, is honestly that was our special sauce, is trying to apply that logic to finances and the disparate things that we all deal with in different frames of we'll call it experience or aptitude.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things going on that I want to explore.
Okay.
And so, on the one hand, what I heard was, if you're designing a user experience to deliver a specific narrative, right? So a narrative from the advisor's point of view, you need the technical richness that the advisor can illuminate, right? When they're delivering that narrative. And that needs to be where all the technical detail lives, but in a way that's not intimidating. There's another angle on this, which is, but in other cases, some of this is self-serve. And when it's self-serve, you really have to dial back the technical aspect so that everything is completely obvious, requiring no narrative whatsoever. It's just self-explanatory.
Totally.
That's a really interesting line to walk in making those choices. It's got to be really intentional for your team, I'd imagine.
It is. And you remind me that there's actually two modes in this. One of the biggest challenges that we all face in data collection from our client is that, where is that data? Where is that information? When I say data collection, tell me about your family, Mike. You got a spouse, you got a partner, you got kids, you got a business partner. Oh, you got trust. Oh, your grandfather set up a trust for you. Don't really understand. Okay, that's fine. We'll get to it. Right. And then let me ask you about all the different financial stuff you have. Turns out the average family has 25 instruments. Now, what would be an instrument? An income. Okay. Hopefully you've got income. Maybe you have multiple sources of income. Maybe you've got an IRA and you've got a 401k. Oh, and you left that old 403b there when you were a teacher for 2 years, right? And you got a brokerage account, and your dad gave you some stock that's kind of sitting in the vault, right? I keep adding that up. Now I add your benefits to that, your life insurance, your disability, and your mortgage, and your house. All of a sudden, now it gets complicated, as you guys know super well, right? Because you're trying to get this data too. The challenge in the early phases of a financial advisor's journey is I haven't always gotten enough trust. It's an early conversation to maybe they're not ready to give me passwords. Maybe they're not ready to kind of fully aggregate their life, but I got to get it out of them. So we enabled two ways to do this. We enabled a direct to consumer experience that they could do in 15 minutes on their phone. And it's highly dumbed down. No passwords, no PII, don't give me ages, don't give me account numbers. Just say, hey, I got an IRA at, I think it's Vanguard. You can misspell it if you want, for $100,000. That's good enough. Next. And we've accelerated that process to build a rudimentary map. And then we can go back, John, and we realize that advisors always forget the critical information while they're on the field, right? So if you ever notice a quarterback, they have like a play sheet, right, on their arm. And they reference every once in a while because the plays get complicated. So we had the ability to overlay what that client's peers have on top of their map visually. So if you forget that they forgot to tell you they have credit card debt or student loan, we can actually overlay based upon their generation, their kind of work they do. You can make your own stencils. These are like stencils. And we found by doing that, it prepped the conversation in a way where it was just like, hey, did you forget to tell me about your insurance? And so we had to really think about, how do you get to this complete visual structure when you have the human fallibility of like, well, I might forget to ask. And that's how those are other really kind of core things to us that nobody else has. which I think really facilitates this kind of conversational value at different levels of acumen. And that's the challenge in this process.
You know, it's funny. You made me think of something while you were talking there about, not only is it a bit of an aid or a crutch for the advisor to not forget to ask about certain things, which is wonderful. It also has this other effect because, as you mentioned, early on in the client advisor relationship, trust hasn't been built yet. So the advisor asking all this information verbally without a tool might get a little bit of pushback or hesitancy. They might not want to reveal all, like go as the phrase goes, all open kimono, right, with all their finances.
Totally.
But kind of like when you're a kid, you can use your timer. Like, okay, you have 10 more minutes. I'm gonna set the timer. When the timer goes off, it's not me who's telling you. The timer is telling you time's up. We got to go home from the park or whatever.
That's
Having
right.
a device, right, in this case, Asset Map, to put in front of a client and say, hey, here's some other things that we need to fill in, and here's why. It's the device telling me to do this, right? It's
That
a
is
really
right.
fascinating effect that it can
It's a
have.
good pickup. Yes,
Yeah.
it's not sales anymore, by the way. Right. If I ask you, Mike, about your insurances, you're like, oh, here he goes. He's going to try to sell me some insurance. Right. But if the system is saying, by the way, typically your peers tend to have group term insurance from their employer, personal life insurance that they bought on their own when they bought a house or got a kid, and maybe someone sold them some permanent life insurance that has cash value. And I'm just educating you. I figured you probably have these or you don't. If you don't have it, we probably need to talk about it. If you do have it, I need to know about it because it's going to affect my planning. And if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, this is going to be an educational opportunity instead of a presumption of sale. The reality is that that's true for all this. And as the movement, as we all know, has moved away from, let's say, product solution sales to holistic advice that leads to sales anyway, is that we need to position differently. And that's an important aspect to not be perceived as a salesperson first, but rather as an advocate and as an advisor. I think that's really key that you picked that up.
You and the team at Blue Leaf, John, kind of basically also saw this in real time with, the aggregation tool. I mean, in the early days, there was a really difficult for an advisor to see held away assets. And so one of the reasons why we were starting Blue Leaf was to make it easy for not only advisors to see it, but for the client, right, to come in and add their held away assets because they'd want to do that now that they have access to this tool.
Absolutely. And I think one of the parallels here is that Asset Map, like Blue Leaf, started with a couple of fundamental assumptions about needing to deliver for both the advisor and the client simultaneously. Because if you didn't solve both of those equations, that you weren't necessarily engaging people in a process, right? If you think about other financial planning tools, thinking about what Asset Map has done that's so unique, from my perspective, everybody's talking about advice engagement, but you can't just slap a layer on to an existing financial planning tool with a questionnaire and call that engagement. It's not. You have to think differently and fundamentally differently in order to have that advice engagement, right? In that case, when we think about user engagement, there's engagement in processes, which are time-bound, and it sort of begins and it ends. And then there's engagement over time, right? And most of what Blue Leaf does is the engagement over time, while most of the engagement that Asset Map is going to be process engagement, right? So you get people deep in, and it's really the combination of those two things that really solves the overall client engagement, solution there. But it's very different. I mean, there's a lot of parallels, right? We, on the Blue Leaf side, the big innovation is we saw the way that major media was engaging people, and noticed that wealth management was still paper report based, right? And major media didn't just say, here, go log on to something. They said, here's a mobile app, here's a web app, here's messaging via multiple channels. And all of those things tied you back to the experience elsewhere. If you think about the way that Netflix works today or the way that Facebook works today, you probably have a message from one of your services in your inbox right now that you've looked at, maybe even not clicked on, but tonight you might go on to Netflix because that reminded you and kept you top of mind and
Mm-hmm.
really created that engagement. It's called the loop in the design world. And it's interesting to see the process-driven loops that Adam's team has created, and sort of the over time based loops that Blue Leaf created, and how interesting and complementary they are. Very similar and very parallel paths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look, setting up the financial professional who's usually our client to facilitate that conversation is really critical in a way that makes us preeminent and makes us look hopefully more capable than the client on their own. I think it's gonna be really interesting as the direct to consumer technology, gets more and more attractive, how financial professionals are going to deliver more value. One of the big things I've been saying to people is that, the tech is great. How do we deliver more you? And I think in situations like what Blue Leaf and Asset Map are doing is they're actually enabling more of what I think the customers really care about these days, which is more humanity and guidance and experience delivered to my life in real time. Like, give me your advisor intelligence. Forget the AI. I can get that on ChatGPT. I need your insight. What's the best decision for me right now based upon the context of my complexity? Because I can trust a human who's got experience, who's done it, versus a trained model. And I think, of course, we'll see more pressures from this, but I think the real key is how do you elevate that advice engagement? And that's what we're really, I think, trying to chisel out together.
It's pretty straightforward for us in the software world to think about what it means to, when you say user experience or client experience, particularly in the digital world. But I think for advisors, that concept might be a little foggy or a little narrow.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could talk about, how you think about user experience at Asset Map, because it's clear to me that it's more than just the pixels on the screen.
Well, I think it's one of my team members said we're not a SaaS or software as a service. We're a process as a service. We're really selling, I think, an approach, a mindset, almost a financial religion in a way, almost like a way of approaching that has an ethos that is, hey, I'm here to help you, be your advocate. And if nothing else, you've got a visualization of your life you can take home with your family. And there is actually a value proposition reward for giving me your facts, which didn't really exist in the past. We're going to give them a big brochure. I mean, so that there's an aspect to that I think aligns interests early in the fact-finding process. In addition to what, Mike, you mentioned about creating a system and a process that's you can't mess it up. But I think for us, we tend to think of, I'll speak for myself. I tend to think of everything as a customer experience. Right now, I am being intentional about my voice quality, my environment, my audio, my visual, my background, all of the production value that is being experienced by the viewer right now. I am intentional about everything. You wouldn't think it because I've tried to make it very authentic. But I think the same thing is true with our financial planning delivery. Can we find a way to accentuate that experience? Here's a simple example. Remember I mentioned the stencils, you can overlay that. If I told you that your peers also have 3 other types of financial instruments I typically see, but I don't see on your map, we found there was a nuance. Originally, we were putting in values of what your peers had, let's say in IRAs. Okay, so typically a 45-year-old male with 2 kids would have $123,000 in their IRA. And it got horrible feedback. Do you know why? Because people would see this and they would either say, I have more or I have less. And they would feel good or bad, or they would, I'm too small for you, or I'm too big for you. Or we found actually just putting $1 was more important. People like you also have an IRA that they left at their old employer, 401k. $1. Why $1? Because we knew it was wrong, but we said it was probably something, but it probably wasn't nothing. And if it was nothing, it was only $1 off. And so at the end of the day, it actually created empathy and awareness. That's the kind of UX that we're now thinking about. We enable drawing on any type of device. You can have an iPad with an asset map or a virtual screen or Zoom, and you can click a key and instantly you're in draw mode and you're saying circle. See this over here, Mike? I need to move this from here to here. I need to draw the circle and I draw an arrow, and I need to split this to the kids and I move it into trust, and this is going to go to charity. Now, does everybody understand what we're doing? Yes, great. So that seems very low tech. Wait, Adam, you put in $1 on a placeholder and you put a drawing tool? Yep. Because it's all about the experience that you're trying to communicate. And I think you'll see more and more, I think, innovation from us as we try to not apply all the newest technology, but how do you apply empathy through technology? And that's, I think, the real measure of elevated customer experience through intentionality of what that experience is going to be when the consumer's in it, when they're actually using it.
So there's two really critical pieces here that I think advisors should understand when we're talking about user experience that I think you articulated really well. So the first one for me is something that I think advisors experience but don't necessarily think about, which is when you design a user experience, a client experience, your outcomes are not just facts and figures. They're actually primarily feelings, right? You're engineering to achieve a certain feeling at the end of the experience. And you're doing that because that moves the dialogue forward in a positive or negative way, depending on what you've done. And you have to be really clear and intentional about that. You know, in Blue Leaf, we've had similar issues. So picking colors. So when the market's down, when we show negative returns, those are not shown in red. They're actually shown in gray, whereas the positive returns are shown in green, right? Because we got same kind of feedback. The gray landed like, okay, it's off, but the red was like waving something in front of a bull, not happy, right? And there's a million versions of that we've engineered over the years. Same thing. And I actually think the $1 thing is brilliant. It's very smart because what you're actually doing is you're turning data into a prompt, right? And that data now encourages positive discussion rather than just deliver a feeling state where you're not sure about it. So I think that's really smart. The other aspect that you talked about that I think is super critical is that, and this is what I was hoping you were going to talk about, user experience for digital products anyway, and really everything goes well beyond the boundaries of the software that we design. You talked about process as a service, which I think is really fantastic because it clearly says that process, the experience that you're having in your office or on the phone or on a Zoom call, et cetera, outside of the bounds of our software is part of what we're intentionally designing for. And, same thing with, I'm sure, your customer service interactions and how you do support and the moment that somebody touches you when they have a sales call, et cetera, all of those things are engineered. And so for advisors, they need to think similarly about their client experience, right? Very broad. So digital's a part of it, in-person's a part of it. Those things need to mix well. You need to think about not only in office, but digital experience. As you said, how's my voice sound? Do I have beautiful lighting? Those kinds of things all matter. What are you communicating in every moment that you touch your clients? And I think that's what sets companies like AssetMap apart, because you're intentional about every aspect of the experience. So well done.
Yeah. Well, of course, I love what you just said. And, the point of design, which I think unfortunately gets put into the graphic world too much, the word design basically is all about intentionality, right? Can we be thoughtful about why and how we're going to actually do something? And that's what design means. It means that someone has been intentional about how creating something because they're trying to solve from a vantage or multiple perspectives. And you see that in art, obviously. You see that in architecture. You do see that in software. And you definitely see when it's not intentional. And I think today, the consumer expectation is they're seeing everything very much designed for their utility, for their experience, to compress time, to get them to value faster. I think where we have an opportunity and a challenge is, how do I help people get to meaning faster? If you can get them to meaning and they've got an emotional connection to it, I think it's sacrosanct. And it has much more value. The irony behind at least AssetMap, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is so much of the design that's in there is lost on most people. They don't see it, and they don't need to see it. They see the value and the benefit in a third of the product. And I think the big challenge for all of us in tech is, how do we not overbuild, right? How do we not over design to the point where now it's almost, you're not really even getting utility. So it's an interesting fine line that we all have to keep working on.
Right. They may not see it, or at least think about it, but I think, Adam, they feel it, right?
I hope so.
They're in the product, and that button looks like it does X, and it does, and I just do it. And that doesn't register except as an easy thing, right? But in order to get there, you've probably done a bunch of testing. You've engineered the little micro copy that is in the mouse over when you glide a mouse over something, and a little bit of text pops up to tell you what it is. All of those little tiny considerations that your team has, poured blood, sweat, and tears in,
No
makes for that frictionless experience. And so, I was thinking about what you were talking about there, this idea of delivering meaning. And I often think of design as equaling function plus feeling, and function plus feeling also delivers meaning. That's how we that plus the cultural context, and we could have a long design conversation about that, but I think this is not the show for that.
We'll geek out on design.
Yeah, we could do that, and maybe we'll do another show on that. But I just find this line of conversation fascinating, because to your point, most advisors don't see it, but they actually experience the benefits of it. And when you're in the marketplace selling, and one competitor is compared to another, these are some of the things that are not obvious until people actually experience the software. And then even then, it's hard for them to articulate why this feels so much better or different, which I'd argue is a marketing challenge for both of our companies.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think here's the kind of takeaway for financial professionals. You might have a design mind. You might be aware of it. You might recognize it, might value it, might not, or you might have heard it was valuable. Whatever it is, and whatever you choose to adopt, that process is being adopted, is being interpreted, is being judged. It's basically accruing to your preeminence, or it's not. There is nothing neutral to your preeminence. And so the question is, by affiliation, choosing products and experience, does that actually elevate your brand and experience, is really critical today, because you are being looked at relative to all these other kind of consumer experiences. Even though they're not directly competitive, expectations are through the roof in terms of design and thoughtfulness and speed. And you want to align your experience for your customers with products that have a continuous attitude of design first, because that's going to accrue to your own value and I think customer experience.
I love the way that you just frame that. It's kind of a great way to take us home here, is because consumers are comparing their all experiences all the time, right? Like, you check into a nice hotel, you notice a difference about how you're greeted at the door, what it's like getting into your room, how big of a hassle was it to get the room you wanted, and so forth. As they think about their financial advisor, they also probably have some digital experiences with other providers and so forth. So they know what that feels like. They know what good service and good process feels like to them. And while they're not necessarily, the smartest people when it comes to the financial products they consume, because that's why they hired you, they do know what service feels like. How do you recommend advisors go about testing and iterating on the design of that experiential process? Because you both talked about it, and I've been in development rooms. John, when you were talking about the colors and the text that comes up, like, that takes the team of developers sometimes like weeks to walk through, like, what is going to happen on a page, right? How do we translate that into the experience that an advisor has with his or her clients?
Well, I mean, John, you have much more experience in this. I tend to come at this from the standpoint of, I'm the dad. I'm just going to tell you what to do, right? And so, right. But I've learned now in software, that's not how you continue to scale. You have to do the classic ask them. And I don't think advisors survey their clients on whether they like this experience or not. For what it's worth, as a recovering financial planner, people got what I gave them, right? I give them, I give them a portal. I don't give them a portal. They don't know what I gave them an 80 page. I gave them a 60 page. They don't know, right? It's what the doctor gave me. I don't know. He gave me meds. He gave me prescription. He gave me, right? So I think consumers tend to be recipients of the professional guidance and take it with a level of, I don't know, the credibility that maybe it deserves or not. But it's not until they have started to see alternatives that they're like, wait a minute, which is what you said. How do advisors address this? They get their top clients that they want to replicate in a room, or they say, I need your help. They ask for help. How can I help you?
Smart.
I need your guidance. Do you like A or do you like B? Do you like, right? And you do it the way that advisors are wired, which is you do it person to person. You don't send a survey and hope that the clients are going to figure it out, because they don't want homework. If they want homework, they wouldn't be working with you. Okay.
Sure,
So I think the key is they should go toes to toes and create even an event. They should do something that is classically advice relationship driven, and they should ask for feedback on whatever it is they're trying to design or be intentional about.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think the word you keep using, Adam, is intentional. So I think you do need to start with intentionality. So, write down, what do you want that experience to feel like? What do you want it to achieve? A few bullets. It doesn't have to be paragraphs and paragraphs. What are how should clients feel about working with you? And the other thing I'd say is an important starting point is, we talk about this a lot at Blue Leaf, is humility. So what do I mean by humility in design? It is not presuming that you know what your clients want, because you don't. You think you do. We think we know what users want. We've proven over and over through lots of research that we're right sometimes, mostly we're wrong. And it's that process of asking, how did we do here? That gets you the feedback, that gets you on the right path. The other thing I'd say is, when you do have those conversations, the trick to remember is not to say, what do you want? They don't know.
They don't.
Your clients they can't articulate. We're all bad at, predicting the future and thinking about how we would behave in the future. We're always wrong about that as humans. You want to look at actual behavior and think about what they do with other services. That's a really key thing. But what they can tell you is whether you're on the right track or off the track, right? So when you hear their problem or their issue or the thing that you're trying to solve for, and you present them with, idea A versus idea B, you can get from them, hey, I like B. And then the key isn't that they like B. Why do you like B?
Why? Yeah.
Why
I'm
does
glad you
that
said
work better for you than A in solving this issue? And they'll articulate that. And then the trick there is, have 5 or 6 or 7 conversations, whatever it takes, to see a pattern form where you get similar answers that feel similarly. Aha, now I'm on to something. Double down on that. Do something more like that. Adjust and repeat the process. And it's about being iterative. The other thing I would say to advisors, and as a group, advisors, we're nervous about being wrong. But if you're going to innovate, the trick is to find safe space to be wrong. And by the way, design, you're always starting wrong and you get toward right. And in these cases, because you're giving an A/B choice, your clients are never going to see you as wrong. They're just going to see you as innovative, and they're going to value the fact that you've asked for that feedback. So, don't worry about getting it wrong. You're going to get it wrong. Have that courage that Adam talked about early on to experiment with those couple of choices, and you'll get lots of really good data. The hardest part about all this, beyond the process, and that's a bit foreign, is finding the time. So if you're a solo advisor, this is hard. But there's no substitute for doing this direct research to really hit it right.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and I would just, for all those advisors paying attention to this, forgive yourself. Okay. It doesn't have to be a professional product. And I don't think you have to hire a team to do it. You just have to do something, not nothing. Even if it's picking up the phone and calling 3 clients that probably need to call anyway.
Yeah.
Ask for help, ask for their assistance. They will give you a lot of leeway. You'd be surprised. And they'll give you gold, which you could decide to double down on or not. I think that the other thing that I think is really great, what you mentioned, John, is also ask them if it matters. Because you could be showing them A and B to something, they go, I think B is better. Now, do you care? Nope, we'll look at it anyway. Would you pay for it? Never. or absolutely. And then you're onto something. And so sometimes getting the validation, we tend to think that we know what they want. Also, they don't know what they want. We should also be checking our ego in terms of saying, well, maybe I actually don't know what you really need. So it's a good opportunity to do it.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it up. This has been amazing. Adam, folks can go to asset-map.com to learn more about Asset Map. Where can they find you? Where are you hanging out if they want to get more of the fire hose of all the Adam Holt goodness?
I'm in Philly. I'm the only one at the office every day.
Guys, looking forward to the Eagle season right now. He's pumped.
That's true. That's a Philly thing. You can find me. The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. You can DM me. I'm pretty open to that, and just reach out, connect with me. Also, we host our own podcast called Rethink Financial Advice, which has been a fun pet project for us. You can check that out. And look, we're running around just like John and telling our story, and we're excited to do it. So we're happy to have any conversations that people want to have.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having.
Appreciate it, Adam.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Augmented Advisor podcast. It was fantastic to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Huge thanks to Adam Holt for joining us. I love how thoughtful he is about design. This conversation really got the wheels turning in my head about how I can better design the experiences for my clients and the members of our audience. So absolutely fantastic stuff. As I mentioned at the top of the show, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. And do us a favor. Make sure you give the Blue Leaf page a follow on LinkedIn as well. We share every episode of the show on LinkedIn, and we would love to have you be part of our community. Okay, that's it for today. Please make sure you're staying safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Augmented Advisor Podcast. See ya. Bye.